The Oscar for Best Picture is presented to...
And the Oscar goes 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 to...
I think we all know who the Oscar won't go to. The Oscars is a month-long event at the beginning of each year, where people from the Academy cherry-pick the exceptional films, directors, writers, actors, and the like of the year that passed. This year's nominations announcement took place last January 13, 2020, and the 92nd Oscars telecast will be hosted on February 9, 2020. Unsurprisingly, Greta Gerwig was not nominated as the Best Director of her 2019 masterpiece, Little Women. This caused, well, an outcry online. People have their suspicions as to why it happened. Maybe it's sexism. Maybe it's internalized misogyny. Or maybe it's just the traditional way we consider masculine craft and content as the one true standard of filmmaking. So yeah, it's sexism and misogyny. So a while back, I tried Googling the word Oscars to get a brief, succinct background to supplement the video, and was directed to a bunch of think pieces and Twitter pages and YouTube hot takes and random pages of the Oscar website. But there was no proper background or history, which absolutely baffled me because it's the Oscars. The one time of the year we all pretend to be impressed by the cinematic excellence of, well, in recent history, white males. And turns out you have to use your brain and Google the Academy Awards because that is the legit name of the Oscars. Which makes more sense than the Oscars, because it puts emphasis on the people with the most influence on elite filmmaking. The Academy. Now, who is the Academy? The Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences is an honorary organization that lives, breathes, and fights for the advancement of motion pictures. It was established in 1927 by Louis B. Mayer, the head of Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, or MGM. At the time, the Academy was less concerned with awarding excellence and more concerned with the labor issues of the film industry in the 20s. Since then, it has grown. And by grown, I mean grown. Despite the details being super hush-hush right now, some sources state that there could be around 10,000 members as of 2020. That's way more than what I thought was just a teeny tiny room of sniveling, evil, actively racist, old white men. But alas, I was very wrong. The Academy has always been big in numbers. In fact, it was already relatively big in 2016 when the hashtag #OscarsSoWhite took the internet by storm. So of the 6,000 people who were in the Academy in 2016, roughly 91% of them were white, and 70% of them were male. I mean, it was pretty obvious from the get-go that the Oscars had a serious diversity issue. The numbers only confirmed it. This was supposedly remedied when the Academy invited more people and women of color in 2018 and 2019. And well, I guess you have to admit that there have been big cultural wins because of it, but it's still Oscar mostly male and white. Why is it so hard for women to be considered as prestigious and noteworthy filmmakers when they're obviously as good as their male counterparts? I think it has something to do with the way we talk about film. Now, I read this fantastic article from FilmHulkCritic's blog about the language we use to explain and criticize film. He calls out left-brain film watching, wherein logic, not emotion, dictates a person's appreciation for a piece of art. This has the potential of becoming problematic because prioritizing logic and craft over anything can feel the sexist vitriol of some critics. And you know what? I agree. Because a lot of female-directed films are given what film critic Hulk and Lily Loofborough call the male glance. This means that movies that are made by and for women are automatically given less cultural value than movies made by men, because of the negative stigma attached to being emotional and feminine. So some critics don't really give female-directed movies a fighting chance. Even with the Academy being allegedly more diverse this year than it was in 2016, so many brilliant female directors were snubbed this year. And this is a huge deal. Because being nominated for Best Director is a sign of respect from Hollywood veterans and torchbearers. When you're awarded a movie to direct, you are entrusted to make nearly all of the relevant calls in filmmaking. Prod design, sound design, actors and actresses, cinematography, direction, you name it. Directors are judged by the choices they make. It is essentially one of the highest forms of praise from the Academy. An Oscar for Best Director means that your vision and direction was the best of the year. It's all about you. Which makes it cruel to only have one woman win Best Director in the 92 years the Oscar was around. I suppose this could be explained by the ratio of males to females in the directors category, especially when compared to other categories with more voters. But a lot of that also has to do with internalized sexism. People refuse to acknowledge great talent when it comes from someone who appears less authoritative than your typical nominee. As I mentioned earlier, Greta Gerwig, the legendary white woman herself, was not nominated for Best Director despite Little Women having a 95% critical approval rate on Rotten Tomatoes. Some people say her snub was justified because the cinematography in Little Women was weaker in comparison to others like, well, The Joker or The Irishman. And that's total bullcrap. To fully understand the brilliance of Gerwig, let me introduce fellow YouTuber Dan Drake. He's here to give a formalist review on the directing and cinematography of Little Women. He knows what he's talking about, so take it away, Dan.
Greta Gerwig's Little Women is one of the best films of the year. Oscar nomination for Best Director or not, this film is directed brilliantly. Let me prove it to you with 3 examples of expert filmmaking. Gerwig decides to tell the story non-linearly. Little Women the book and all of the other film adaptations told the story of the 4 March sisters chronologically. Now, while slicing up the timeline might sound potentially confusing, this approach actually helps highlight many of the core themes. By placing youth and adulthood directly next to each other, Gerwig is able to juxtapose the often stark contrast between the hopeful aspirations of youth and the harsh realities of adulthood. For a movie about 4 women struggling to take ownership over their lives in a world run by men, this editing approach both adds something new to the story and also highlights its original themes cinematically. It also allows for one of the best montage sequences of the year. The parallelism of these scenes took my breath away. One of the first things I noticed about the filmmaking was the use of color grading. The childhood scenes are shot in warm, sun-baked lighting, while the adult years look cold and muddy. Now this serves 2 functions. First, it serves to help the eye make sense of the timelines so that the viewer can instinctively know what time period is being shown. And second, this visually supports the stark contrast I mentioned earlier. Towards the end of the film, Jo declines Laurie's proposal.
I don't believe I will ever marry.
And she sits down in the grass on a hill overlooking the town. Now, the way this image is captured, it makes Jo look small in the frame, which reflects how small and ashamed she feels in that moment as a character. This type of intentional, meaningful composition is found throughout the entire film, and is even there from the very first frame. The opening shot frames Jo within a smaller frame of a glass door. This technique is called, well, frame within a frame, and it communicates that as Jo stands at the threshold of her dreams, she's being kept in a smaller box because she's a woman. Certain doors are closed off to her. Her head is down. She's apprehensive. And the glass is frosted. The future's uncertain. Her dream is only a remote possibility, and it hinges upon men in power. Cut to the final shot of the film, she stands before another pane of glass, but this time, it's wide and borderless. She watches as her book gets made. Despite all the hardships she endured and the doors she had to knock down to get there, she turns her face towards the camera, head held high, full of pride, self-assured. And as she holds her published book in her hands, she is finally content with her story and with her life.
Thanks, Dan. I know that Greta Gerwig is probably one of the whitest women you'll ever meet, and that she's still protected by her white woman privilege unlike women of color directors, but the Academy snubbing Gerwig, a seasoned director who has exhibited excellence in her craft for years, is proof of blatant sexism. Basically, if a woman directs a film for women, it will always be perceived as a lesser piece of work no matter how objectively amazing it is in both content and craft. because we are conditioned to believe that stories told through the eyes of emotional women are less deserving of critical praise. So this is the real moral question. What do we do next? Well, there is no right answer. And perhaps I'm saying this because I am too cowardly to make a half-decent decision. But as of now, there are two different thoughts bouncing around in my mind, and these might not even work. I'll share them with you guys anyway. The first one is that we get better at giving movies and media created by females an actual fighting chance. We have to actively work on rejecting the rules left-brain criticism established decades ago, even if that means searching for joy in movies written by females, whether they're considered as cultural faux pas or not. We have to create a demand for females in this industry, otherwise nothing is ever going to change in the Academy. Up the opportunities we give to women and people of color for the sake of representation, and our odds of being recognized by the Academy increases. And then we also start to make ourselves more aware about the Oscars and the nomination and awards process. We learn about it. We know who's involved. And more importantly, we demand more transparency from the Academy. It is baffling to me just how secretive they are about their numbers and statistics. That shouldn't be the case, especially when the Oscars present itself as this governing body of the film industry. Those who watch it need to be informed. Now, would I consider my proposed solutions as Herculean? Yeah. And the cynical part of me believes that neither solution will ever happen. That part wants me to tell everyone to just boycott the Oscars and take away its gatekeeping power over the film industry. But then Dan over here reminded me that it doesn't end with the Oscars. It's like the Hydra. You cut off one head, and another springs in its place. And that's true. You take away the Oscars, and it could continue in another form. Maybe the Golden Globes, or something. But people will always try to gatekeep cinema. It's a systemic and difficult change. But when I think about the Oscars and film even more, I start to regain the faith I lost from the ego and greed of these self-imposed cultural governing bodies. I think I allowed a little hope and naivety to slip into the cracks of my pessimistic and realist mindset because we saw tiny baby steps with widespread movements like Time's Up and Oscars So White. Are we close to cultural revolution and the liberation of the film industry from the clutches of capitalism, sexism, and racism? No, but we're approaching it, and if nothing else, we at least have that.
We were saying I live in this neighborhood, which is right around NYU and New School, and I can't tell you how much it means to me when girls who are starting in film school or art school come up to me and they say, I wanted to do it because I saw you do it, and I believe it, and that connection with these girls who are so excited and maybe believed a little bit more because they saw a woman nominated. I think that's been incredibly meaningful. And
hey guys! Thank you so much for watching this video and supporting this video, and a huge thank you to my YouTuber collaborator Dan Drake. His channel is linked here and down below, so be sure to give him a like and also to subscribe to him and check out his material. He makes me see films in a way that I don't see them myself, and he helped pull me out of this pessimistic mindset I have about the Oscars, so that's pretty much great. This February is a month of collaborations. I will be having another one later on in the month with someone who the channel is familiar with. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and comment down below what you think we should do with the Oscars, and if you have any solutions other than my proposed two. Hope you're having an awesome day, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!